All right. My dude,
What's up?
how you doing?
How do I sound?
Your audio is really, really bad.
Your
Can we do
AirPods,
something
though.
about that?
Yeah, let me try. I'm going to switch to a different set of
Ross, how are you?
standby.
Gingelo and Amanda, hi. Let's see. Morgan is here. Howdy, howdy. I'm still trying to figure out this background image thing. It's not really collaborating very well. Ross, in your honor, I chose a new background track for tonight. Something a little more jazzy. Dude,
God
get
damn
off the toilet, man.
I was almost at life alert.
I'm gonna temporarily mute you until you come back. Done. All right, we are waiting for the rest of our panel. Should be a solid crew tonight again with Dr. Sandstorm and Pat Sturma. Hopefully he stops by. Blackbird, hello. It's really weird to sit on top of an image. Hey, Graham. Andy, I hope you didn't stiffen at a soccer game, or football game as it is rightfully called. Hey, Jan.
All right, Mr.
Well, let's see that
Professor.
hopefully the rest shows up.
Is
Does
this
it
any
sound
better?
a little bit better? Yeah, this is much better. Good. We're going to have to send you a microphone at some point and just get you up to professional levels. Seraphim, hello. How are you? Now, Seraphim, you asked a wonderful question today, and while the rest is hopefully showing up here before too long, I'm just going to bounce the same question that I actually answered for you in our DM over to our friend here with the sketchy microphone quality. Seraphim asked about particularly the development as far as, let's just say, Project 2025 is concerned, and with the majority of the coastal states being either purple or blue and some, of course, red, how they would go about conquering essentially those states. And I'd be interested to hear what your response would be on that, Gen X.
That is a good one that I'm
How
going
would
to
they go about it?
actually ask for a little bit of time to ponder my response on that. That's a really good question.
Sure. So I'll give you my answer while we're waiting for everybody else to show up. My answer was essentially that, hello, Van Gogh, haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. My answer to this was essentially that, from what I understand, they want to bring a lot of things back to state level. For instance, education would be decided on state level, which also means that the financing of education would happen at state level. So public education would be financed at state level, and the federal government would essentially pull out completely. Unless, of course, you are playing along with their tune. So my thought is, in order for them to capture coastal states, if the state doesn't play along, they're going to feel the absence of the federal purse. If they do play along, they get what they want and need to sustain whatever the operations are at state level. So I think it would be a monetary invasion or suspension, if you will, rather than anything that is carried out through conflict. That was at least my perspective at this point.
That was a really good answer. I think the depth of that can be reflected on every other federal law that supports funding, right? Um, if the federal government wishes to have certain age restrictions, for example, great example is the drinking age of 21, right? Well, Hawaii was one of the last states to raise their drinking age from 17 to 21 because the federal government threatened to withhold federal money for roads and highways. So the objective in this case would actually be really simple. I think that your response is pretty clear. If they want to create federal funding for educational programs, for example, they could create certain mandates that the states would either choose to adhere to or not. But by not adhering to those mandates, then they would lose federal money for specific programs. So that would be a great way of withholding it, being able to get power or get states to fall in line based on we're not making you do it, but if you want funding, you're going to have to do it.
Yeah, that to me makes a lot of sense. And Denise Conroy, I'm gonna have just a short moment of fangirling. Welcome to the panel.
Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time. Right up top of your box is my 18 years worth of friendship with Gen X dad. He's actually one of the very few who I know personally outside of the app. Class guy. He doesn't usually show himself that way, but he really is.
Amazing.
And yeah, meet Gen X.
Hi there.
Denise, it's great to meet you.
Same.
Very shy, so shy I've never seen you. Anyways, let's just tap into the first subject of tonight, which is essentially the political messaging piece until everybody else shows up. We talked about it offline more than once that the Democrats are particularly challenged in their political messaging. And of course, knowing a little bit about Denise's background, somebody who certainly intimately understands communication, product positioning, and communication as far as essentially catering a message is concerned and capitalizing on a message. Let me just bounce this off on the two of you first. What is going on that they are so absolutely ineffective? And whoever wants to just jump in first, please be my guest.
I'll take that one. I always think about, so I was on Bill Clinton's campaign, right? I campaigned for Clinton in 92. It was my last year of college at West Virginia University. And I was just like, Bill Clinton got me riled up. Like I was so excited about him and I really wanted to work on that, get involved in politics for the first time. And I go to my first Young Democrats meeting and it's packed because there was a lot of excitement at my school. And one of the things I noticed is we could never get anything done because we were so big tent. We are, and that's good, right? That's one of the things that we love about being Democrats is that, we embrace everybody, like bring everyone. But the problem was that we could never have any like rigor or, any sort of organization to it because everybody was just wanted to be heard. And we want to make space for people to be heard. So I think that especially in grassroots, that hurts us. Then you fast forward to, I was going to run for Congress back in 2010. So I went out and like launched got a bunch of people, had commitments for over $2 million, for the seat, which at that time was way more than I needed. Not today, but way more back then. And, everybody in the Democratic Party was like, basically, fuck you. It's not your turn. And you're going to have to get in line and wait your turn. And what I thought was kind of, for me at the time, I've gotten, I think, a lot more liberal actually, but I was somewhat moderate on some things. And I'm like, I think that could probably do pretty well, especially in my home state of West Virginia. And they were just like, they wanted no parts of it. So I think at grassroots, it's that we don't have, we let everybody be heard, which is cool. But then in the upper echelons, I think a lot of times, very controlling. And I think that hurts the message. It hurts the energy. I'd love to hear what Gen X dad thinks.
Yeah, that I agree, and I feel that it gets a little bit more granular than that. And Professor, please stop me if I start to go off on wild tangents or get up on my pedestal too long. I feel like what makes the left different from the right is that we don't have the easy path that the Republicans have. And when I say the easy path, I mean they are very much together on a lot of their stances, right? You think of the Republican Party, you think of a bunch of older cis white guys, right? There's not a lot of diversity. So the messaging platform for the Republicans is a much more simpler concept. Now you switch that to the left, and we have a lot of issues. The issues is that number one, we actually make up the majority of the voters in the United States, hands down. And we make it up because we have so much diversity within our party. And in that diversity is where the problem lies. The problem being that we have so many marginalized groups that make up the majority, that every different group has a issue, right? And there's this thing called intersectionality that we tend to understand a lot more than the Republicans do. But while we understand it, I also feel that this is where we lose our messaging. We lose our messaging because, while we have all these various groups who are all fighting for equal rights, an issue that is worth fighting for, that we absolutely have to have. But the Republicans do a great job in helping to sow divisiveness in each marginalized group. And a great example would be if the Republicans sat back and said, wait a second, okay, guys, the BIPOC community is starting to quiet down because they're starting to feel inclusion, they're starting to feel like things are going their way. Let's see how we can do something here. And they do a very good job of creating messaging that makes the BIPOC community feel even more marginalized, but they do it at the expense of potentially the LGBTQ plus IA community. And they'll create a sense of messaging that makes one feel like, wait, you're getting more than we're getting, or you're getting more support than we're getting. And it becomes, no. Well, the reality is we want everybody to have the same rights. But what we don't have is the communication strategy to make every different marginalized group feel that we're standing behind each one. So we spend a lot of time and energy having these fights within our own selves, within our own party. And it gets so bad that when it comes time to primary, for example, that an entire group of people will be made to feel that because their candidate didn't win the primary, that they were ignored and they were marginalized even more. And the Republicans all of a sudden will go, wait, we're here for you. And they're going to go, yeah. I mean, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, the birth of the never enter candidate here movement, right? And yeah, I was I was all in on Bernie, but I wasn't so all in on Bernie that I'm like, well, I'm not going to vote for a Democrat now because Bernie. But there are so many people that are so invested into that one candidate that addressed a movement very important to them. They didn't marginalize another marginalized group within our community, but they also didn't address it. And because that happens, and it's going to happen again in 24,
Well,
we spend a lot of energy infighting about it, and then we splinter while the Republicans sit back and go, our messaging was simple. And it really was, because they were all in on a singular candidate to begin with.
well, I'm just going to throw that out for consideration. If you ask anyone in a conversation, what is your stance on diversity, equity, inclusion? You're not going to get a bumper sticker answer. There just isn't one. It is multi-layered. It is unbelievably difficult. And when you think you addressed a few of those layers, you realize that you just actually opened the can and there are another 50 beyond that. So for us to actually have cohesive and concise messaging is unbelievably challenging, if not actually impossible. But therein lies the quest now. And Gen X and I had a conversation earlier today, perhaps it was yesterday. We briefly touched on Occupy Wall Street, which was a noble effort, but started with 2 or 3 or 4 talking points, and out of those suddenly became 15, 20, 30 And within that volume of talking points and agenda items, you're losing your narrative. Now, flip it over to the GOP, 5, 10 talking points at the most, and suddenly you realize how easy it is to actually communicate those. So not an easy one. The question is, and this is why I'm really happy that Denise is here, because we can restate the problem a million times until we're blue in the face. We got to solve it.
Yeah.
And the question is, now the good thing is I did not know about you that you actually ran or contemplated to run for office. Now, I am not necessarily surprised that you were told to wait your turn. I am disillusioned and angry for you on this because it's a completely asinine position, obviously.
Yeah.
But we got to fix this. And considering the multi-million-dollar operations that you ran from a communications perspective, is it fixable, or are we barking up the wrong tree?
I think it's fixable. Here's what it requires. And I always say this, I loathe what the Republican Party stands for. I've loathed it since even before it was maybe even way more palatable than it is today, right? But something you got to admire is, remember, they're corporate hacks. And I know a lot about corporate hackdom because I came from that world, right? And so there's discipline to that. And there is a discipline to a corporate background. So what I think about is one thing that they do, there's a guy named Frank Luntz. You guys ever hear of him? Frank Luntz? Yeah. He is, for those of you who don't know, on the live here, he is this political spin doctor. He's kind of like the spin doctor of spin doctors. Language is his thing. And I think we in our camp often forget how much words matter. They matter mightily. It goes back to what you were saying, Gen X Dad, about, how can you stay real tight on a message, right? You stay tight because you use the right words. So this guy is the guy, he wrote a book, and I remember I read it. I saw him on the Today Show, like back in the 90s. I'll never forget this. And I was like, damn, like that is some discipline. He wrote a book called Words That Work. And he gives the example in the book about global warming versus the phrase climate change. And he says, we decided we were going to use the phrase global warming because it's asinine to a lot of people who don't understand. They're like, well, it's not always warm, and it puts that little seed of doubt in their mind, and a phrase sticks and it's born, right? So I think that we're going to have to take, if we want to really be in the game and win, and I want to win, right? I want to win. I want justice to prevail. I think we have to take pages of discipline and rigor like that, right? And I think that's what we lack.
The problem, though, is, and by the way, next to you is now our resident psychiatrist, Dr. Sandstorm. Hello again. The problem here is, again, in the multi-layeredness of everything, because if we were to focus and hone in on, let's say, the top 10 identified issues, the issue number 11 is going to leave some people out. And it seems that we cannot get to grasp, to the degree of grasp, that we got to focus on 10. And your 11th, although important, cannot be considered at this very moment in time. Exactly. Unfortunately, that is what pisses people off, going back to Gen X earlier. Well, I'm a burner. Oh, Bernie didn't get the nomination. I'm not going to vote at all. Or I'm going to go third party. Or screw you all, and I'm just going to vote for Trump. How can we overcome that? And this is actually, I'm just going to just parlay that right over to Dr. Sandstorm here. As far as the ego is concerned and the consideration is concerned by not being included in a talking point, what are the mechanics, if there are any at all, that we can educate people that, no, you're still considered. We just haven't talked about specifically your personalized item here. You are muted. It's much easier when you unmute.
Thanks. Well, this goes back to what I end up talking about frequently, which is the brain differences between conservatives and liberals, and the brain differences between people who are rigid in their thinking and fear-based versus those who are able to understand nuances in their environment. If you're able to understand the nuance in not being included. You're not rigid about your interpretation of that. So you don't take offense to it. You understand that there may be a myriad of reasons why, and you don't go into that fear response, which then leads, of course, fear always comes from perceived threat and then leads to typically anger, the fight or flight response. For some people, it's flight or freeze. But those people who are less developed in their brains in the limbic area that regulates emotional responses and determines and filters what is a threat and what isn't, on its pathway to the amygdala, will have that kind of rigid response. Conservatives, I hate to say this, but in many, many studies on conservative brains versus liberal brains, we find that the anterior cingulate gyrus and the insula area are underdeveloped, whereas in liberals, they are more developed. And those areas of the brain are responsible for taking in the sensory input from other parts of the cortex, primarily, well, I won't go into all that, but and then determining, sort of filtering and understanding the nuances in that sensory input before it's passed along to the amygdala. In people that have underdeveloped parts of the insula and the anterior cingulate gyrus, they tend to also have overdeveloped amygdalas, which is responsible for the response to threat, aggression, anger. And so we do know that there are pretty consistent differences in folks that think rigidly versus those who can understand nuance.
But considering that the amygdala, as tiny and prehistoric as it is, also is quite powerful in suppressing signaling to the prefrontal, well, now we have a logical adoption issue. And actually, what you just brought up, I haven't even looked into. So allow me one question that may or may not sound perhaps a little bit ignorant to the subject. But does that, from a cognitive development perspective, give radical right-leaning individuals an excuse actually just not to even grasp it? And are they reachable, or is it going to take so much more time to break through that barrier to even have a conversational basis that we may just sidestep that altogether because we don't have the time, much less the opportunity? Because essentially to get there, we have to have a willing participant and some manner of, well, let's just call it isolation.
And therein lies the $64 million question. You know, what does it take to break through that when one is already wired up in that way? And, you know, of course, there's, you know, the possibility of neuroplasticity changing that wiring to a degree, but one has to have the availability and the willingness to participate in the kind of therapeutic modalities that would help to rewire those circuits. So, you know, to answer your question, I really can't.
Yeah. No, that's fair, which is sort of what I almost expected. And I know that Gen X Dad is itching here because that goes right at his pathway, if you will. Lay it on us, my friend, because I know where you're gonna go with this.
Well, they do call me the mega whisperer. I agree with everything Miss Dr. Sandstorm said. And I love when I get to speak on lies when you're here, because it forces me to slow down and think about my words so you don't come back with, and how does that make you feel, right?
I promise.
But in all seriousness, you know, I'm going to speak a lot less scientifically than you. I am a big fan of things like public speaking. I'm a big fan of things like that I get to do professionally, because it gives me the opportunity to connect with people on either a one-on-one basis or a one-on-some basis with, you know, small groups of individuals. And what I have learned is that, I'm going to use TikTok as an example. there's a lot of big creators here who are on lives almost every single day having political discussions where we'll invite a MAGA up and all they do is basically sit there for 2 hours on a live and scream at each other, which serves no purpose other than the potential likes and clickbait. But it doesn't do what the optics of the intended outcome is, which is changing hearts and minds. We as a group need to do a lot better in the way we choose to communicate, not just with each other, but it is important now more than ever that we take those opportunities to reach across that aisle and have these conversations, but we can't do it in a way that says, you're stupid, because all that's going to happen is it's going to be like that disastrous, relationship where all they're doing is throwing pots and pans at each other.
It
But
triggers the fight or flight response.
immediately.
Hmm.
And what I have learned through the course of my career, both personally and professionally, is there are different ways of being able to have these conversations in a way that, number one, doesn't threaten anybody, because one wrong word can be a threatening word immediately and just take everything off the rails in that instant. And what we tend to do is we tend to say, well, you're a Trump supporter and you're stupid. And tell me one policy, that you like, or that we have gone beyond that. Sandstorm, I forgot what it was you said when you first started talking about it. Again, pardon my brain, it's there, but I can't remember. But we cannot have these arguments or these discussions where we base them in facts anymore. Facts don't matter. And I don't mean to say that facts aren't important, but what I'm saying is if you integrate facts into your conversation, they tend to take facts as threats. Tend to take facts as insults. So instead of saying, why do you like Trump? We have to we have to phrase our questions differently. And instead of asking questions like that say things like, why do you like Trump? I'll ask people, questions because I already know you like him. That's why we're here. My question is, give me something specific that he does that's important to you. And they'll give you an answer, whether they're angry or calm about how it's delivered, but they'll still answer it. And then your follow-up question to something like that is not to say, oh, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You have to validate that. And you have to say, that's really interesting. Why is that important to you? What about you makes that something important? And how does that affect you? There are ways of talking to people. And I hate this term, trust me, believe me. But trust me, when you have these types of conversations with people who enter the conversation expecting the worst, it becomes a very disarming way of talking. It becomes a very disarming way of actually having a conversation instead of an argument. And as much as I want to just absolutely destroy somebody when we're debating, well, we've lost the art of debate a long time ago. We can no longer call it debate because it's not a debate, it's an argument. And it's not an argument with any intended outcome other than to see who you can piss off first and who will leave alive first. In face-to-face argument, who can you piss off first and who's going to throw the first punch? The intended outcome really needs to be who can convey their messaging so that the other person understood it. And I guarantee you that if we all stop to pause to actually calm ourselves down for a moment, to actually take an interest in the conversation rather than trying to poke sticks at somebody, we will win those conversations a lot. And the whole point, and again, Sandstorm, to your point of diffusing that anger, it's not only that, when you ask somebody a question like that, whether they're an educated person or a insanely uneducated person, when you get them to have to say their point out loud and to actually hear themselves say it, it is shocking how many times you will see somebody stop, realize that what I just said was really stupid, and actually reflect on that. You know what's a win? Getting a MAGA to do something like that, getting them to actually pause and reflect. Because
You,
I
yeah,
guarantee the scenarios are much different for us than them in that they're told what to believe, they're told what to go after, they're told what their party wants them to believe because that's just the way they were programmed and the way they
Yeah.
are. We
You
can change that.
you lost me at evidence doesn't matter though. So
No,
I'm already used.
I don't mean to say facts don't matter. What I'm saying is if we throw facts at them, they're going to come back at you with the what about isms or the any other excuse they have to dismiss your facts that it just doesn't matter. You can throw facts at them all day long. We have to change that conversation from a fact-based argument to more of a empathetic-based conversation that
I want to
actually
touch on
shows.
I
It's
want
like
to touch on something that came up. Yeah, Denise, actually, please go.
sorry. It's like a teaching moment, though. When I think about, there are some people who are magnificent at this, and you're right. It's about saying, you hear somebody tell you what they think, and then you go, let me ask you to consider a different perspective. And then you launch into the, here's some evidence. And you don't hit them with all the points. You just hit them like a point, right? Because again, it's that back and forth. You know who's really good at this is Katie Porter. So if you ask me like who I want as like my next president, I'd love Katie Porter because remember where her background is. She's a lawyer, she's a law professor, right? And she is so damn good at teaching, right? And now granted, she brings a little snark to it. I'm sure if she was on a public stage, she'd have to take the snark down, which I would hate because I love the snark. But she'd get through to more people, right? Because all she'd say is she'd pull out the whiteboard and say, let me ask you to consider a different perspective. And she'd lay the evidence out. So I think sometimes that's what we miss.
Well, I mean, that's not to toot my Katie Porter small horn here, but that's essentially what I'm trying to do with just about every single production. And it was quite interesting, particularly today in response to that Project 2025 video, where somebody just said, well, you're just fear-mongering. And I posted a response based on that just a couple of hours ago. But I want to go back to actually a word that still sticks with me from actually in the chat. Seraphim threw it in, the word identity. And this is one that I had set aside as it came up for Denise, because you've dealt with people who have identities and egos larger than life. And I wonder if there are any findings, any predictables that you have learned over the course of time where you found it to be perhaps a more predictable path to changing someone's identity or bring them in. What has worked for you in that realm?
It is that notion of saying, very much like what Gen X dad said, especially in corporate settings, tell me why you think this, and they'll tell you, why is this of interest to you? Why is it important to you? A lot of times I'd say to people who are other executives, like, what do you need? Right. And you want to listen for two things. You want to hear what they need from a tangible perspective, but you want to listen. And I find women to be really good at this. What do they need that they're not telling you? So for example, I used to work with a guy that had a massive ego and he headed up sales and he needed me to help him hit his target so he could make a lot of money. Check. That's easy. But then he also had a massive ego and needed me to compliment him frequently. And so I can either be right or I can win. Win as in, hit my goals and the stuff I want to do. So I think sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to put that time and that work in with people, even though, God, you're like, Jesus, like I really have to do this, but you do. So I think it's really helpful to be able to say to somebody, what do you need? Why do you think the way you think? And then you can come back and say, totally heard and understood. Let me offer a different perspective. And that's where it's your time to lay out the case, pull out the evidence. It works pretty well. And who's someone I used to try it out on all the time? I was married for 20 years. I'm in my second marriage. I was married for 20 years the first time. I was married to a guy, came from a real blue collar background like me. They were farmers. And my ex-father-in-law was like so right-wing, not super well informed on a lot of things, like you see, right? And I would just have these normal conversations with him, right? Where I'm on the other end of the spectrum and I'd say, well, tell me why you think what you think, And we'd sit there and have these long talks and I could see him changing over time. But to your point, this political identity, so my undergrad's in political science is my master's degree. And political identity, most people, they don't change what their parents are. So if my parents were Dems, I'm a Dem, right? It's very rare for someone to change that identity. So it is very much part of who you are. I'm sure our psychologists can tell us all about that. But it's a tough thing to change.
Well, that does bring up um, an interesting question that no one has yet been able to do a prospective study of long enough duration to answer the question, because we know of these brain differences, and the question is, how did they get there? Is this genetically predetermined, which most neuroscientists these days would argue that very little of what we know about or what we can see about an adult brain is actually genetically predetermined because of the process of neuroplasticity, which is a process that it is influenced 95% by environment. So what is it that creates a brain that's rigid, that needs to feel the safety of belonging to a group, that has a tendency to value to in their moral judgments value actions rather than expected outcomes, that sort of thing? What happens? Were they born that way, or was it a process of environment? Now, what we know about the development of the brain is that neonates who are incubated in wombs that are under chronic stress, as measured by cortisol levels in the saliva of the mothers, come out with underdeveloped insulas and anterior cingulate gyruses and overdeveloped amygdalas. Why is that? Because we think the cortisol has an effect on that development. And of course, the amygdala has a lot of cortisol receptors. Are we tending, as for instance liberals, to be more empathetic with our offspring, to be more nurturing of mothers who are pregnant, and therefore we're producing children who have brains that are developed to understand nuance, to be empathetic towards others, to be compassionate, and the vice versa with conservatives? Or is there something that's happening in the environment after birth that leads to that development? I think it's really hard to tell. But going back to this question, how do we message? What I find as a psychiatrist is when I'm listening, I don't screen my patients for are you liberal or conservative before they come in my office, and I seem to be able to communicate with everyone pretty well, equally well, and that's because I'm leading with the attitude of I care about how you feel and what you're thinking and what your experience is. Let's talk about that. Help me understand that. And I think when you lead with that, with most people, conservative or liberal, you're going to open up their minds. You're going to open them up, disarm them, in other words, so that they can be open to a conversation.
That's right. It makes me think about. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to cross-check something here. And I am bringing in something that doesn't necessarily correlate, but maybe there is some form of bridge. Considering intergenerational trauma and its ability to affect DNA, and not in a destructive, but in a modification sort of manner. I mean, that is relatively recent, coming out of Canada in 1966, if I remember this correctly enough. And essentially was determined to be the effect of Holocaust survivors and their children subsequently. Is there a possibility, before we bring it back into something more reasonable, is there a possibility that, particularly on the Republican side, that the belief system is so deeply ingrained as far as identity is concerned, and the passion that we see with Trump supporters coming out and are, from a social judgment perspective, are not experiencing any concern to make a complete fool out of themselves, at least as far as my version looking from the outside in. To them, this is normal. But therein lies sort of my question: is there an ability for such deep belief that it actually has a similar effect as intergenerational trauma on a person's DNA? I mean, that's a loaded question. There is no evidence. I'm just trying to build a bridge here.
It would seem that that would be a possibility. And again, I think prospective studies are needed, but we don't have time for that right now. What we need to do is break through the barriers of communication, and because the other side from us, everyone on this panel is liberal leaning, because the other side is more fear driven. We can just assume that their need for a sense of safety before they engage in communication with someone, for them to feel like, oh, this person cares about me and isn't going to hurt me, is really much higher than us. We're more likely to be able to hang our asses out over a crevasse than they are. So we have to keep that in mind. I think, like I related the last time I was on live with you guys, the conversation I had with the guy that's now been indicted and convicted for breaking into the Capitol on January 6th. The way I approached him was he was upset because his family had gotten some threats because he was misidentified as someone who was bullying a black high school student, a female high school student. That was not him, but somebody identified, gave that person his name, and he was getting threats, as was his family. So my approach to him was, that sucks. That must be really scary for you and your family, and I'm really sorry that that's happening. And he was disarmed at that point, and I said, and you know what? I understand how that feels, because I have family members who I love very much who are members of the LGBTQ community, and they don't feel safe, and I don't feel safe because they don't feel safe. And none of us should have to live like that. That's not right. And so then we were able to have this discussion where we actually discovered that we had common ground. Like, he believes in a separation of church and state. He believes in freedom from and of religion. And it was kind of interesting, but we couldn't have had that discussion if I hadn't led with, I'm really sorry you're going through that.
Denise, you had something loaded, ready to go.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about neuroplasticity and, these, being sort of leaning one way or the other, from a brain perspective. It made me think of the connection between, because we always say that higher education especially is this liberalizing force, right? You send somebody to college and most of the time it's going to make them a wider, more expansive thinker, okay? I don't know if it makes them a Democrat necessarily, but it makes them a wider, more expansive critical thinker. And it's very interesting to me how we see, not interesting and not a coincidence, how you see higher ed right now really, really under fire, especially public universities. And I really see that as a way to take that liberalizing force and shrink it. Because I feel like always makes me think of, and I always butcher this Voltaire quote, but the rich require an unlimited supply of the poor, right? So if we take people and, right, we take them to these glorified, like at my alma mater, West Virginia right now, they're trying to make it into a glorified tech school. And that'd be great, but I think it's going to really limit people's earning power. It's going to limit their ability to discern what's what in the world. So I find that kind of interesting. And I feel like that might be part of a larger plot. And I know people are like, oh, not everything's a conspiracy. I always go back during the Gilded Age, the group of 400, the most powerful families, right? The Astors and everyone else. And they would literally sit around and plot, how are we all going to do this, right? It was collusion at its finest. So I don't doubt that something like that today exists when it's a hell of a lot easier to do it.
The thing that stands out to me, and I'm coming back with the conversation to the original intent, I suppose, is the disparity in numbers. Now, Denise, what you explained earlier makes a lot of sense to me. It is the intent to listen and understand and actually really truly understand the motivations of somebody's position and disposition perhaps towards a variety of topics. But since we're talking politics here, let's just say what is potentially going to unfold. The issue that I see is the disparity in numbers, that this conversation is a one-on-one conversation. Whereas the mass media approach, from bumper stickers to 30-second reels, I forgot who that was as far as the commercial is concerned. Somebody put DeSantis in the God created farmer kind of commercial idea. I posted a video on it about 6 months ago. There must have been some legendary commercial at some point with somebody created farmers. Denise, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Interesting. I don't know this one.
Oh,
No.
okay. Yeah, no, it was this voice of God in the off, basically, and God created farmers, so God created DeSantis. So that was sort of the play on this. 30 seconds, playing very much to the heartland, very much to the boots wearing, Chevy driving, not to alienate any Chevy drivers, here's the first brand that came to mind, but very much positioned in that way, mass appeal. Yet we're looking at conversations of one-on-one. That's a numerical battle, for the lack of better words, we just can't fight. So what do we have to do to reach the masses? And this is sort of where I'm coming back now to the political messaging conversation. What the hell do we need to do?
So I have an idea, and it has nothing to do with messaging. And I've been thinking about this, honestly, for the last several years. Do we need another party? And does this party need to be, okay, for lack of a better term, the regular party, the ordinary, like just the party where you put somebody out there that's not Trump, right? Remember, what so many people love about Trump is that they perceive that he's the guy, I'm going to drain the swamp, I'm going to tell you like it is. I think Americans would love somebody who would tell it like it is and actually like walk the walk, right? Not just talk the talk. So I wonder, is there a need? I kind of thought that's where the Lincoln Project was going for a while, that there'd be like a Lincoln party or I don't know, something like that. But is there an opportunity for a party that actually is new and is just like, hey, this is what it is, right? The what it is party. I don't know what that looks like, but I just feel like I certainly would love an alternative to the Democratic Party because I don't love the inaction. I don't.
Well,
now I'm going to vote Democrat over and over again because that's all I have to vote for, but I don't love it.
I would call it the Fetterman Party, to be honest.
Oh, love Fetterman.
I mean, I was watching his reaction to the impeachment announcement, and all I could think to myself was, I have never in my lifetime seen a politician that actually represented the average American more than John Fetterman. John Fetterman represents the average person. He showed you that you don't have to be a millionaire or backed by billionaires to get elected, and you know that his background puts normal people in his crosshairs. These are the people that I want to support. These are the people that I want to speak for. And I think that would be the perfect response to your talking points, Denise. It would be the Fetterman Party. And now it doesn't mean it's about Fetterman, but that to me speaks volumes about what kind of a party we actually need. He doesn't represent a upper class, and he doesn't represent a lower class. He doesn't represent class. He is just a middle of the road guy. He is truly the average Joe that other politicians love to talk about when they're on the campaign trail, but stop as soon as they get elected. Fetterman he ran on that platform, he won on that platform, and he still represents that platform. That's the representation that needs to be sought after and talked about, in my humble opinion.
Well, and that comes back to the empathy piece, because if you're relatable, if somebody can look at you and say, wow, that guy's a lot like me, like, he doesn't have a lot of money, he's not a billionaire. I think it's very disappointing. It's disappointing for me to see Democrats in office going in. I mean, how can you make $175,000 a year and come out a multimillionaire? How does that happen? I don't care which side of the aisle you're on, and I think it's awful. It's awful, and it's disheartening. And so for us to have a party or a person who is relatable like that, that can how did Trump get elected? He got elected because he presented himself as the savior for the forgotten people, the people who downtrodden, the farmers, the laborers. And in fact, he could give a shit about them. And they don't see it. They still see him as a savior. Um, but if, but I think more of them are waking up and starting to see, well, wait a minute. He didn't pardon any of those people that went into the Capitol for him, and he hasn't funded any of the legal funds for any of those people. And wait a minute, you're starting to hear more stories like that. And and why did he require a bail bondsman? you know, Showing up, to with a check from a bail bondsman. Um, so I believe that you're right. Somebody like John Fetterman who can be relatable to that population and say to them, "I know what it feels like, and here's what I'd like to do to try to help you. Tell me what you need."
The idea of a Fetterman party or any party. I mean, we have more than two parties in the U.S. anyway. There are numerous parties registered, except they don't see the light of day. They have no funding. I think the closest they ever came to some form of notoriety, if you will, was the Green Party, which then turned out to have pretty deep involvement with Cambridge Analytica. So that didn't help their cause. And do we need somebody, fresh air, fresh wind in our sails? Absolutely. But is now the time to fracture when we are looking at potentially Project 2025 unfolding? No, that's the wrong timing. And since you brought up Trump and what he was and perhaps again is able to do, the thing that surprised me was twofold. One, how wildly erroneous the polls were in 2016 or 2015, respectively. And I actually think I did put on a class on that with preconditioning, because Trump had the upside of having had the population preconditioned in a sense that he was positioned as somebody who has the power over other superstars to tell them that they are fired. It turns into a very easy sell to portray that to the commoner to say, well, look at me. I can throw Gene Simmons out of my office, who is known to have an elbow out every once in a while. And again, that positions him at a level that we haven't seen before, and clearly we've seen the outcome. Can he do it again? No, I think the sheen's wearing off a little bit. But we really don't have anybody good to run, considering how close Biden and Trump are right now. And now to advance the entire subject here, from political messaging, which again, I think we are not going to solve tonight, but I want to wrap this up before I move into Project 2025, because if we are not succeeding with our messaging within the next, well, let's just say roughly year, give or take 11 months, we are going to have hell to pay, because this project is no joke. And it's been in the works since 1979, iterated every single time, and they're closer than ever. So let's put a cap on this real quick as far as communications is concerned. Do we have a chance? How does what does it need to look like as far as concrete steps would be concerned? So I'm just gonna throw it up to Gen X, who's been itching.
No, I'm listening. I'm listening to some brilliant people and keeping my mouth shut for the most part and learning. But I think what you and I are working on in the background, um, the focus really needs to be in helping our candidates learning how to change their messaging as well, because number one, a lot of messaging coming from our candidates is still very tone deaf. A lot of the messaging from our candidates is still very 20 years ago, and they're still running campaigns and they're still running policies and talking points the way they did 20 plus years ago. They're not modernizing. They're not keeping up with the times. They're not keeping up with the changes in culture. They're continuing to, and to use Denise's words, earlier with spin. Well, spin no longer works because our our population is de-aging. And when I say de-aging, meaning we are getting younger voters, and we're getting younger voters coming, especially in 2024, in greater turnouts than we've probably seen in some time. And they're also educated, and they also know when they're being pandered to. We have to start working with our politicians, and we have to change it so they understand what it is we, and I mean the population, what we want and what we need, not what we want to hear or what they think we want to hear. I want to be able to ask a politician a yes or no answer question and have them simply answer yes or no, not give me a 10-minute, or a speech why they're not able to answer yes or no. That's the problem that we have to fix. And I think that if we could get our candidates to actually recognize who they're speaking to and learning how to read the room for the most part, right? Understand what the outcomes are that we're asking for, then we could make better decisions as a populace on what candidates we actually want to vote for as well. So it's kind of a two-way street in that conversation. I think what you and I, Mr. Professor, have been, we'll keep that a secret for now. I think that's what has to happen. I think that our candidates and our parties have to leave behind the old ways. I'm not going to say the better days, the old ways, and actually learn how to communicate in modern times, because that's what's sorely been lacking.
Let me add to that, though, because I think it's beyond the messaging. I think it's a bias for action. We have this thing with Democrats where when we have the power, we don't use the power. Okay. There have been so many times when I've wanted Joe Biden to stroke an executive order, and of course it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and of course it's probably going to get whacked down, right? But it doesn't mean that you don't show that you have a bias for action. Okay. Like I see this on climate crisis. I see this on guns. Guns should be a public health emergency. Sorry, not sorry. And I'm a gun owner, for God's sake. I live on a farm. So I really believe that there have been so many times when we have had the power, we have it now, and we don't use it. And I think part of that is, somebody mentioned it in the comments, we have a big problem across the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, Congress more generally, which is that you've got this boomer generation that will not go away. And I know that sounds awful and terrible, but they've had their turn to run the world and they haven't done a very good job. So I need them to go off into the sunset, go to the Keys, go wherever the hell you got to go, and let somebody else have a chance to run it. Okay. This is coming from this Gen Xer that nobody ever paid attention to anyway, but someone's got to run this. And I just think that that's another problem we have, certainly in our own party. Nancy Pelosi's going to run again? What? I think she's awesome, but no.
Too good.
Agreed.
Way too good.
I also think that, if I can chime in, I think that the messaging has to be, think of what you have to go back. What won over the Trumpsters? The idea that there was somebody who was going to address what they feared and fix it. Didn't he say, I alone can fix it, right? Hasn't he said, I am the chosen one? All of this, that he didn't mean, obviously. But if somebody can just step up to the plate, like Denise is saying, and directly message, say, or was it, I'm sorry, Gen X dad, this is what we're going to do, and stop being afraid. I think it's the fear that, I'm going to lose votes on, in this faction or votes in that faction, but simply step up to the plate and say, here's what you're concerned about. Here's how I'm going to fix it. This is what I'm going to do unapologetically. This is what our intention is as a political movement. And yeah, you may lose some votes, but people want to hear, how are you going to help us?
Yeah. Can I bring something up though? And I'm a numbers person, a stats person. I don't think I'm winning over the Trumpers. I don't think it's my mission. I'm not being funny. My mission is to get people to the polls who otherwise are not excited enough about the Democratic platform to go to the polls. So that's going to be activating Dems, but it's also going to be winning over indies. And a lot of the independents are younger people for good reason. Like I live in New Hampshire. We have more registered independents than either party. So that is just that's kind of our tone here. That's how we are. But I think we have to work harder to win over that undeclared voter or the Democrats who are going to be like, oh, Biden again. Ugh. That's our challenge. We can win those people over. You got enough to win the election. That's just numbers.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. From a messaging perspective, just to cap this off before we move down the list, if you will, I just looked it up. Statista, I'm right there with you. I'm a little bit more of a numbers person. By July 2023, the latest stats, the US is the country with the largest TikTok audience with approximately 122 million users. I just need to look at my own audience demographic stats, if you will, and my predominant demographic is starting at 34, 32, whatever their age segmentation is, and upwards. So there are plenty of people around, and I'm by far not a large creator. There are people with millions of followers who probably have a similar demographic layout as I'm having in the audience. But that also means that people are reachable through this medium. And Jeff Jackson, for instance, is just masterfully putting on a master class, if you will, in how to do this. And from a messaging perspective, although I have not seen Jeff Jackson of late for some reason, he, well, there's somebody I gotta invite. Let's see if he wants to come up. House of Petty, join us, my friend. I haven't seen him of late, so I don't know if he's not been doing anything or if the algorithm just suppressed him. But in any regard, it shows that people are really attaching to what he's saying, who he is. He's got 2 million plus followers. What is going on, my friend?
Nothing. I just I'm gonna hop over to my friend Maggie's, but somebody just sent me a whole bunch of information, some inside information on the Council on National Policy and the Family Research Council on how they're creating these minute churches and Minutemen in the churches to get evangelicals to vote. And they sent me over the flyers. Like, I got a hold of a lot of inside stuff that I wish I could get over to you so you could see it, because it will chill you to the fucking bone. The issue is with Project 2025 and this working together, like, when we really look at it, going forward, that's their plan. Whether it's a Republican now or Republican 10 years down the road, this is what they're gonna do. And it's terrifying what I just got a hold of.
Can I DM you my email? If you want to shoot some of it over, that would be great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll shoot some of it over, because when you look at these screenshots and stuff that we have, like, oh my God, it's literally telling the churches to start arming people and to start forcing, to start running political rallies out of their churches. Like, it's really bad. Yeah. And telling the churches to get ready to be armed at any moment, and ring the bells. It's pretty bad. So DM me your email and I'll send over that information. But this is not. Were you watching the what was her name? She used to be George Bush media person. His you know who I'm talking about? Nicole Wallace.
Oh yeah.
She came out on live TV and she goes, "The shit is about to hit the fan. Like something's really bad is about to happen if something doesn't stop Donald Trump and his people who support him." And she finally fucking said it. Somebody needs to fucking say it. Like, something's got to give, because this is getting too much. It's too much.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if you caught that video that I posted. It's been months ago, but connecting the 7 Mountain Mandates to the Congressional Prayer Caucus. So they are right there. And when you look at Project 2025, it's just an expanded version of 7mm, and
Yep, it is.
nothing good is going to come from that.
And the my angle at this is that I I think I've gotten through to two women so far, to really understand when I show them these pastors and these men who are raping children in their churches. What they don't they're finally getting that their daughters are not safe, and that the people that they're going to protect are the men. The daughters they don't care about. The boy moms are going to worry about the boys, and the laws that are being written are to protect the boys. And a couple of women have started to talk to me about it and say this is wrong, and I'm like, well, yeah, but you don't understand. You're creating, we are mirroring what they do in other countries, and I'm going to say it, in Muslim theocracy countries. We're doing that with Christian theocracy. And if we don't come to fucking realize that and understand it, people can call me Islamophobic or whatever, but no, it's seriously here. Like, that's what's being done. It's being mirrored. And it's a problem.
It's religious
yeah, no, it's a
extremism.
massive issue.
Yeah, and it's
It
religious
is. It's extremism.
and right, and they're getting radicalized in these churches. I have it here in my community where I live in Southern California. We have a church here called the 412. I'm just going to say it. I don't care. The 412 Church, headed up by Pastor Tim Thompson. Look him up on YouTube. He has a
I know who
YouTube
he
channel
is.
called Yeah. And he has a political PAC that he's running.
Yeah.
And everybody in
Yep.
his church contributes to that PAC. And then he has taken people from his congregation, not only encouraged them to go to the Capitol on January 6th and was egging them on, but also he has packed our city councils and our school boards here in this area.
Yep.
So now
Yep.
we're seeing these ridiculous policies being passed by these school boards and city councils, and I think I've said before, I was cautioned by a former Riverside County Sheriff's deputy here in Riverside County in California. Don't go speak there, because I have a family member who is trans, and he said, if you go speak, this is a small enough community. I mean, it's it is Southern California, but they'll dox you. They'll find out who your family member is, and your family member and you both will be targeted. You will not be safe. He was a former Riverside County Sheriff's deputy, and he was telling me that, and he said they are rife with oath keepers in that department.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
Yep.
Patty, real quick, before you have to run, from a development perspective, as far as 1979, the starting point of Project 2020, what is now Project 2025, would it be fair to say that they're as close as they could have ever been to actually seeing this come to reality, or are we still having time? Where are you on this?
We don't have their first thing that they have is in place. They have the Supreme Court. That they need the Supreme Court, and that's the thing.
Yep.
All they need is look what they're doing with this. That they're using the Supreme Court to get what they want. They are going to ban through the Supreme Court methylpristone. They're going to ban birth control. They are going to bring up these laws that are coming through. They have the Supreme Court, and that's why they don't care who wins or loses as the Republican. That's why I keep saying it's not Trumpism, it's Republicanism. Like, it's not MAGA. It's literally Republicans. And they are drunk on power with the Supreme Court. They feel they can do whatever they want. And it's also, you have major politicians who are walking free right now when any of us would be in prison. And it's just a deluge of law breaking. Ron DeSantis breaking the law. What Lauren Boebert's doing, breaking the law. Like, it boggles my mind. So it's already in place. All they need is just to be able to get into the presidency, to be able to write executive orders. And if we try and challenge them, guess what? They're going to go to the Supreme Court. Do you see what I'm
Yep.
saying? The Supreme
Yep.
Court really always was and is their end game. Now they can do whatever they want. But Leonard Leo is going to be taken down. I do believe Leonard Leo is about to be taken down. I hope.
That would be at least one tiny little shred of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, he's been engaging in some pretty shady tax evasion. And I've some independent sources have told me that he's probably going to be facing some prison time. So we can cross our fingers. So, all right, I gotta get off of here, guys. I love you. All right, bye.
Thanks, man. I'll DM you. All right. Well,
I just want you to recognize, Mr. Professor, for just 1 second that I did not fanboy over that and I stayed totally calm. Thank you.
I saw your face get red. Don't even pretend.
A lot.
Plus, we're only seeing your torso up. I mean, never
Hey.
not even going there. In any regard, to touch back, 122 million users in the United States. Jeff Jackson does an outstanding job, even though I haven't seen him of late. Now, Viv has come on very much to my amusement and everybody else's, but it shows that there is potential here. My question as far as messaging is concerned, whether it would make sense to have an aligned strategy within the Democratic Party to say, hey, listen, everybody, we are running the same 10 talking points with an additive to say, no, we are not forgetting about you. You are 11, 12, 15. We got you once we steer the ship again.
Yeah.
Just have sort of this almost like a like side effect. You know, somebody talking really quick. No, we are not forgetting about you. You're still on our radar, but let's squash this bullshit first.
Yeah.
And when this side guys just blush. Rockwell, of course, I blush all the time. That's never mind. Moving on. In any regard, when I look at Project 2025 and what's in it, and when I look at the summary that I just cobbled together within 7.5 minutes, which seems to have made a little bit of waves, this is some dangerous stuff.
Well, I think that the first thing that we have to acknowledge about Project 2025 is the talking points on the left, our talking points, not you and me, but I mean collectively. Project 2025 is not about Donald Trump. Project 2025 is about power within the Republican Party, because what we're talking about is establishing an oligarchy, not a president who holds all the power. We're talking about unifying power under some billionaires who are going to be pulling the strings from behind the scenes, exactly what they want. They wouldn't be doing something like this if they didn't think that they could have themselves a presidential candidate puppet to be able to manage. And who better of a puppet than Trump acting on the whims of billionaires doing what he wants if they give him the reins to be able to do and say whatever he wants as long as he does what they want. So this is not a establishment of a doctrine or manifesto that was written with Donald Trump in mind. Donald Trump just happens to be the perfect candidate to fit the narrative of what these people want as they were writing it, and he fell into their laps. So,
which is why DeSantis actually scares me more than Trump.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Because I think he'd be worse. But I think that as talking points go, your video, not to blow smoke at you, but your 7-minute video about Project 2025 is one of the best I'd seen out there. It was amazing because you touched on so many of the points that people need to hear, but the wrong people are hearing it. This is not something that is going to affect Democrats. This is something that's going to affect everybody. And if people on the right don't think that it's going to take rights and privileges away from them, they're wrong and sorely mistaken. If we're talking about people on the right going, well, I don't want no Democrats taking my pew-pews away from me, rah, rah, two-way. If you're talking about an oligarchical society, who do you think threatened them? People with pew-pews. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to take them away. They're going to crush human rights. They're going to crush civil rights. They're going to do everything they can do to create so much discourse within society to turn the infighting amongst all of us so that we're not focusing on them. And I think the litmus test for them was the 4 years of Donald Trump. 4 years of Donald Trump was a fantastic litmus test for them because those 4 years have turned Americans against each other more polarizingly than any other president in history. And those people in South Carolina, when they were updating that manifesto based on their '79 doctrine and 2016 doctrine, they're sitting there going, "Oh, this couldn't have happened more perfectly. This couldn't be any better. This is exactly what we want, and we want that guy to be the face of it because he will fall in line."
Well, yeah, he's also not the sharpest cookie in the box, so or crayon rather, in the box. How did I get to cookie? I guess I'm hungry. Anyways, let's jump on to 2025 for just a hot second because obviously there's a lot in it, but I think some of it particularly concerns Dr. Sandstone and particularly your family, if I may touch on that. And since you said earlier that you would essentially be, well, doxxed, but it's more than just being doxxed by your friendly neighborhood or unfriendly neighborhood church. That would be doxxed in a very, very legal way. You're muted.
Right. I mean, that's what this nice gentleman whom if you saw this guy, you'd think he was an oath keeper, but he's an ex deputy and he's he's liberally minded, and he was feeling very protective of me because I actually treat one of his kids. And it's frightening. He pointed out to me, he said this. He said, "I want you to know, people get hurt and sometimes unalived while the body cams are off." And he said, if your family member is known to them and a traffic accident or caught speeding, they could be in grave danger. That caused me to completely step back. I mean, yeah, I operate from behind the scenes now. I do my activism from behind the scenes, but I can't be up there front and center speaking at a meeting opposing their viewpoints. Even in the most diplomatic, unthreatening way. So that's pretty hard for me because I've been an activist for more of my life than I haven't.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think
from that perspective, I mean, anybody who does not, and I've tried to somehow summarize it to that degree, but the reality really is anybody who is not the winner of the genetic lottery, being white, male, and then with the attitude of Christian, the American version of alt-right Christian, is pretty much doomed. Right. And I'm trying to figure out what needs to happen that people actually understand that, because nobody has time to read 920 pages. I mean, that's the reality. We're all taxed beyond means, and when we finally get home, we watch some TV. And I'm trying not to be too prescriptive, if you will, in my recordings. I'm kind of sort of leaning in one of my next recordings to just basically give people a sort of a playbook, which I am really apprehensive toward. But how can we get it across that if this hits the fan's going to break?
I think there has to be messaging on all of our parts, on all of our platforms, on this app and on other social media, messaging that isn't, what we've been talking about, I'm going to bludgeon you over the head with facts, or I'm going to call you an idiot. We have to come at this in a way that's not a lot of editorializing, but with the real possibility that all of our rights could be taken away, all of us, except for that part of the population that Zeitgeist just mentioned, that if you're not white, male, and Christian and hetero, then forget it.
Yeah, I mean the logical consequence here is that even if you are white, male, and Christian, you likely know somebody and care about someone who is not white, male, and Christian, maybe as close as your daughter. And actually, I remember House of Petty did a video on that, and he is a lot more blunt than I would ever allow myself to be, which I greatly appreciate about him. But driving that point home that the people you care about that are unlike you, if you have won the genetic lottery, are going to be in danger.
Mhm.
And the issue that I see is with too many people brushing it off, saying, well, A, not going to happen. B, cry wolf. C, we are not Germany in 1933. Like, yeah, that they didn't think that either.
Yeah.
And I do not know how to get this across in a more poignant way, if you will, summarized, bumper sticker style, that people understand that in action now, the consequences. I mean, where do you go from here?
Well, to be honest, I think that, and I know that I say this until I'm blue in the face, but that has to start here. It has to start at our level. It has to start with the way we are communicating with each other. That's first and foremost. And we do have a voice here, to be honest, especially you, Professor. You have a voice that is far greater on this platform than mine. You know, when we talk to each other, we can't be afraid to call each other out for how they are, when I say they, I mean others, are positioning themselves in their posts, in their lives. I do follow a lot of creators on TikTok, and so far I have yet to see a single creator, and absent of you, that is actually creating relevant content and not in a way that ends with, and my next follow-up video will be, I told you so. Well, that type of messaging is combative and it doesn't work. It has to, we have to, we are, the party of empathy, of empathetic people. But in the creator world, we don't act that way. In the creator world, it's a lot of videos of, okay, let me tell you why you're an idiot, and then here come all of the facts and all of the humor, and it ends with, I told you so. It doesn't start with, hey, can we talk for a minute? I don't see videos where people are actually trying to reach out because, like I said, and I agree with something you said earlier, Denise, right? I mean, you're not here to talk to the mega crowd, right? We have enough in our own party that we need to talk to. And I think that we have to play on the strengths that everybody brings to the table. If you're somebody, that has the ability to calmly, rationally have a discussion with a MAGA, then we absolutely have to capitalize on that. But if not, that's not minus points from somebody. But if your strength is you have the ability to get in front of thousands and thousands of people in a way that says, while they are all like-minded, well, part of their messaging has to change too. So, that's a strength that needs to be capitalized on. And I think that, if we change our strategies here, because we don't have a lot of time to do it, if we change our strategies here and actually start to create content that is centered around, you know, I want you to understand this. And here's why I want you to understand this, because when I explain to MAGAs why I left the right and went left, and if you look at my profile, I very publicly say that there. I used to be a Tea Party Republican. What I have learned is that if I were to boil it down to its simplest talking points, if you are a Trumper, MAGA, or even a Republican, you belong to the party of me. But if you're on the left, you belong to the party of we. It means I care about not just myself. I don't care what the government can do for me. What I care is what can the government do for us? And what can the government do for you? Because I have empathy and I do care about my fellow man and my neighbor and people I don't even know or will never meet. We all deserve a life of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We all deserve that life. So if anything exemplifies that, it's the left. So we have to buck up just a little bit.
Right.
And regardless of the clickbait that we all love and we all love to laugh at, we have to change our messaging in a way that shows people that, I truly want to change hearts and minds, not I want to get TikTok famous.
Let me pause
Absolutely.
you there for just a hot second. The question that I want to throw in that might be one of the loaded ones, and I certainly have not found an answer to that. Clearly, we, as we are in this portal right now, and the chat for the most part, and the people who watch my videos and Annie's videos and Patty's videos are now aware of Project 2025. What I have not seen is any form of communication from the Democrats. Why is it our responsibility to that degree that we are educating the public of the consequences of inaction
Right.
when the Democrats actually stand to lose as far as their power and representation is concerned, stands to lose more? Why are they silent?
Nor do you hear any of them mentioning the Seven Mountain Mandate.
Correct.
None of them. Not even the Dems that are on TikTok.
No.
So I think we, maybe it behooves us as the TikTok liberal community or Democrat community to send messages to our politicians that are running for reelection or running for to say, look, you need to start talking about this. For instance, I had an opportunity, I didn't, but I will, to speak with Adam Schiff, and I'm going to message him about this and say, because he wants to run for a Senate seat in California now. He's a congressman, but he needs to be messaging about that. They all need to be messaging about that, and I think that also we have to understand. It goes back to marketing principles, right? If you've ever taken a course in marketing, which I have, and I used to actually work in marketing before in a former life, and you have to understand your audience. What do they want? What do they need? You have to speak. You want to provide for them what they want and need. So it kind of goes back to that. We're talking about people whose wages aren't, they're not able to live on their wages. They can't afford their rent. They can't put gas in their car. They can't afford their child care. They can't afford their groceries. How are we going to appeal to them? They want to know, how are you going to solve my problems like that? The farmers back in 2016 thought that Trump was going to save them. Well, he hasn't. And what's destroying them right now? Climate change, right? So we need to speak to what is going to save your crops? What's going to save your way of living?
Yeah, because the farmer wasn't saved by anyone already anyway, and if 2025 comes to fruition, the basically removal of any form of environmental protection, the EPA would go down.
Right.
We are screwed 6 ways from Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Wonderful. So consequences of inaction.
Well, can I jump in with one more thing before you continue?
Of course you can.
We have to step it up a little bit too, as constituents go, because somebody just posted in the comments, and they're moving so fast. We're here talking about it, but what are we doing about it? And when I say the what are we doing about it, I have yet to hear a Democratic leader, whether it be local representation or state representation or at the federal level, I have yet to hear any outcry of Project 2025 or yet any mention of Project 2025. So when we talk about using our voices, yes, on one hand, when I talk about where we can start here, there is a movement that needs to happen that is not happening. And that movement is we need to be flooding our representation. We need to be flooding their emails, their Twitter, their phone lines with questions and demands around why are you not addressing Project 2025? Because there is a fear there because it has to be a fear element that is keeping them from addressing it. And other than that, I don't know why else there would be such silence about it. So
Why has the Lincoln Project approached it?
I have not seen, I've not seen it.
Curious. I don't know. Look at that.
And if anybody, and thank you, Sandstorm, because if anybody would have addressed it by now, it would have been the Lincoln Project. They are all over everything. When, but not this. And
Right.
what one of the things this tells me is that our representatives are no longer afraid of the voters; they're afraid of the money. And that's something that we have to reclaim and recapture. We need our representatives to be afraid of us again. And I don't mean fear of bodily harm, I mean fear and repercussions of losing your position. And they're no longer afraid. They're not listening to their constituents like they used to. In the 80s, politicians, they listened to their constituents, or at least they gave them the belief in the optics that they did. We no longer have that belief or optics anymore. We don't look at an Adam Schiff or even an AOC or anybody who actually talks about their constituents anymore. They it goes to one of the things I talk about a lot, which is performative activism, right? It's performative on our parts because if we don't take action, it's performative by definition. Theirs is the same thing. It's performative to the point that they will pander as long as they must because the question is there until they no longer have to, right? But at the end, it's the decisions and their votes that actually show who they are and what they do. And while those decisions and votes that we actually see a lot of times are not in alignment with the promises that they've made. Why? Because they're not following through with their promises to us. They're following through to the promises from where they got their money from. And they know that if I want another term, they need the money. And where are they getting their money from? They get their money from the corporations and the big donors, not from the little people. It's the corporations and the big donors that they have to satisfy. And that's the message that has to be flipped. And that's what we have to go after. So if ever there was a call to action, the call to action is somebody needs to organize some way of getting us all together as one single voice to start flooding the shit out of their communication methods so that they have to address it one way or the other, especially with 2024 so close and announcements so close. That's the messaging that has to shift.
So from the creator's perspective, it really demands more educational principles, not from an alienation perspective, not from the, oh, I am telling you and otherwise, or you bad person. It's not to offend anyone's ego, but to draw them in. And perhaps, again, what Petty did the other day, it was very unmasked and very much to the point that there are consequences for the inaction because, and actually I think Seraphim might really be on the money there, at least to a large degree. In chat, she put in that one of the reasons why they're not saying anything is because they don't want to alienate the church. And as religious as this country is, including Democrats who are religiously attending church, unintended, alienating that crowd is going to cost you votes.
Do we think it is? Oh, challenge it.
I would challenge that too because the population of people who actually go to church is dwindling rapidly.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I think the sense of urgency on the part of the churches, because they're losing their money base. They're people that tithe and, put the money in the plate when it comes around. So that is what is at stake for them. And that's why they're moving more aggressively. But I don't think people who actually, maybe people who are Christian are still, I know plenty of people who identify as Christian, but they're not churchgoers.
Fair. Yeah, I don't think we ever had the super hardcore churchgoers. I just don't think they're in our wheelhouse. And I think we spend a lot of time chasing people that we're never going to win over. I look at Biden. It's one of the things I hate about his leadership some days, because I think he's still operating like it's 1980, and he's in the Senate. He's a gentleman, and he can reach across the aisle and, partner with someone in the other party. His days are gone. They're just gone. Like, the power dynamics changed, and you can't win them over. So no more carrot, and now we go to stick, right? Because when they've got the ball, it's stick. It's stick all day long, right? And so I just think that, yeah, I think some of these folks are unwinnable. And I think the hardcore religious writers, we never had them to begin with.
Well, and you're also right, going back to what you said earlier, and your point is so valid. We wouldn't have to try to win over a single Republican if we could ensure that we could get the majority of Democrats or Democratic leaning people to just vote. And that is one of the biggest issues that we have to address when we talk about that is, number one, disenfranchisement, because that is one of the biggest reasons. And the other one is apathy. And admittedly, I say this a lot. I voted for Donald Trump, not because I voted for him, but because I thought it would be a cold day in hell that he could beat Hillary Clinton. So what did I do? I fell victim to voter apathy and chose not to vote. And by doing that, I strengthened his base. And I will never do that again. Hi, Carmen.
Hi, you're
Hello.
not alone in
Hello.
that. Yeah, sorry, I got to talk over I don't have my mic. Let me angle here. Uh, I wanted to join because Project 2025 is pretty instrumental, and I've been like kind of indicating. Uh, a lot of my friends here know that I talk a lot on genocide, right? Has anyone correlated the final solution to Project 2025 yet? Because that's
Oh, yes.
something I haven't said too much out and open yet. But if you actually look through and you look at everything that's in there and you compare it to what they have, it is most definitely the final solution. It's the written implemented plan. Let's see. Yeah, I will think about it. Thank
No,
you.
it goes to when, and I think it was my like second pinned video perhaps, with Trump's statement of, in order to clean the cities, we just have to evacuate everybody who is homeless and put them in tent cities, which is really just a reverbalized version of quote unquote the final solution. So I mean, it's right there, and it's embedded in 2025 as well. So the only
It's
problem
not.
that I have is with how to verbalize it without triggering TikTok to throw me off the platform.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of my account's actually ironically in good standing as of recently. So that's why so that'll help a little bit.
Congratulations.
I know, right? And this is my OG account too. So this is the one I've miraculously never gotten it banned. I've walked the tightrope. Um,
You gotta give
but
some tips here to Smiling Eyes because she's not quite like you on this. Sorry, had to throw it in.
I bounce to backups. All your things drop in 3 months. So you just have to be good for 3 months and you get to keep your account. And so you post all of your general good content that won't flag things on your main, and then you have backups for your stuff. And then you can I stitch and I go look at this. That's my thing. I'm like, look at this, because then I'm like, I'm not risking this account, but this is important. So I'll do that. There's a lot of other parts to it. I talked about the Global Project 2025. I'm not sure who maybe has talked about that, and that is something else that everyone should be wary of. I love, I love you. But that is something where these people that are, everyone knows me. I'm not GOP by far, but I'm also not a Democrat. I'm not a fan of Biden, though I understand his usefulness. Right now, I'm more concerned because if you're catching, he's saying Cold War phrases. He's saying them right now. We may have to prepare once more for that time. He literally said an exact replica phrase for Cold War phrase, and they caught it. And then he's also preparing people and basically warming them up to the notion he has prepared a meeting with South Korea because North Korea was at the BRICS meeting. And North Korea and South Korea have a conflict. And so there's a lot that's in that Project 2025 when you look in it that are even some of the phrasing Biden is mimicking now. He is using phrasing from that. So that was what intelligence said, worst case, by that time might end up happening, and it's starting to. The only other thing I want to bring up is, and I'm kind of utilizing your platform, and I apologize, but it will help everyone. The disabled community, abortion regulations, and it'll help fight against the Project 2025. Is I've done a lot of work into ADA regulations. Some of you may have seen that. ADA protects infertility and other things that they're actually targeting right now specifically. And abortion regulations are technically illegal underneath that bracket I found out through, I have a couple lawyer friends who say that it's an extremely strong argument, and there's two ways in which we can bring this forward as a nation without having to have out-of-pocket expense for us. One is filling out in my main Tato Unicorn page, on my bio, the link, there's a DOJ form. If we get survivors explicitly in the last year to go fill that out, it's basically sicking Biden's lawyers after it. This will also help the Democrats win the election. So hear me say this. This will also help them win the election because of the abortion regulations and everyone seeing that it will get pushed because they don't see much action from him. So if we do this.
Yeah, can you make a video particularly highlighting your form so we can share that out to our...
Yeah, I did do a video about it a little bit, actually not too long ago, but it's not getting much traction. That's why I wanted to join a thing, because I have the link in there, and then I put in there, and then I put in the different infertility reasons, and I apologize, the reason this is different is because I have my daughter. The different infertility reasons, there are literally thousands, but I put like the top 20. Men also can participate in this. I want to make sure you understand men can participate in these forums if their partner has undergone an abortion and had needed abortion, was denied abortion, that kind of thing. Men can participate in this because they also contribute to infertility. Infertility is an ADA protected right. So we can have women and men submit forms en masse on that website and get our rights back at cost of the government and not cost of the people. And then we can also issue like a summons basically to Congress to put forward a new bill and get abortion regulations, which would include gender, and help getting more gender protections for our transgender friends into the ADA section, right? So instead of going about a whole new amendment, which is what everybody wants to do, let's do what Republicans do and add 3 sentences. Add 2 sentences to an existing regulation that applies to SCOTUS too. So if you, I'm going to, in my little tangent in a second, but I just wanted to hopefully get everybody on board with this, because if you want to end Project 2025, if people know the simulation, this is the way to get Biden to win and to get abortion regulations back, because all the other lawsuits that are going on right now, they're very instrumental. Even talking to lawyers, because I literally talk to those lawyers, right? I talk to the U.S. Center of Reproductive Rights. I talk to lawyeringproject.org, because I'm doing a different lawsuit that is approaching a different way. It'll be announced in like January 2024. You guys all get to hear this, that this is the only time it's like soft launching. It may get launched in a month, depending on what it is. But it's going to be a V-Fed case, not a V-State case. So all of these abortion regulation cases that you're seeing right now are state cases. So that means they have to go through the state, then they have to go through federal, and then they have to go through this. And so you're looking at like a 10-year process. We have no chance of getting regulations anywhere soon with that, right? So what if we skip steps? What if we change the game and we change the lawsuit? I'm not saying how. I'm saying that my lawsuit's going to be the first of its kind in the whole entire United States, the way that they're framing it. But they need us to basically over-inundate other areas, which is with that U.S. Department of Justice And so they asked me to get out the message, and I've just been desperately trying.
Yeah,
So
make sure
you're
you
saying, I
record
want to
on
get
that so
this.
we can follow along, obviously. And yeah, Dr. Sandstone, please go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm captivated. So, um, so you're saying that women and their partners or families who have been negatively affected by being denied an abortion, have been harmed, can sue through ADA law?
Most of us, so there's one thing I've been doing huge. It's actually been a 2-month deep dive progress, probably about 400 hours collectively between working hours and non-working hours, just reading about the MTHFR gene. And I felt like that had a huge thing. 50% Americans have it. It correlates to a whole bunch, and that's both on the male and female side. So that is a stat that they can bring and just say 50% right there, right? On top of PCOS, on top of cancer, on top of being overweight, being underweight. There are literally thousands of reasons in which can cause infertility that are listed there. So if people submit the form specifically citing their health history, that they have this A reason for infertility and B being denied this is a violation of my ADA rights, then we can have the government sue on our behalf and we pay nothing.
That works while we still have the chance. And if they roll out 2025, Project 2025, that chance is likely going to be gone. Let me just bounce it over to Star
On that
Child.
was so much information. I know that's typically when I join in lives. I just like data dump, but that's kind of my thing.
So the best
But I
thing,
wanted
Carmen,
to.
the best thing you can do on that, Carmen, is just put a series together, a bunch of videos, happily share those out once they're finished, obviously. Just, yeah, like you said, it's a lot of info. I just want to bring it over to Star Child real quick, particularly as far as 2025 is concerned and the restrictions and the possibility for damages. Considering you're a veteran, you've had your fair share of experiences, how would that affect
Yes.
you?
Well, I am a disabled veteran at a pretty significant percentage, not 100%, but I'm close. And I mean, that's how I get by. That's how I live. And if they just decide, oh, I could easily see them taking this to, we're not going to start compensating our disabled veterans anymore. You know, they went, they fought for, and we have so many since 9/11. I mean, I'm pre 9/11, but we have so many since, and so many young, millennials and even some Gen Z and stuff that are they have some really traumatic injuries and PTSD and things, so they're just not employable, and they are existing on that compensation that they get. And I tie that back to your videos and you talk about Trump and his rounding homeless up into camps, and that a huge percentage of the homeless population are veterans. And I mean, we see it in every city, everywhere we go. So for how it would affect me, obviously, if I lost my compensation, that'd be huge. And I also have, two children that are on the autism spectrum, one that is disabled enough to need
And
to be in a
I
group
also
home.
have,
And
two children.
so I'm getting an echo. When you start talking about these, things like the end of social programs and Medicaid, I mean, everything's paid for through Medicaid. And, if they start returning all of that to the states and take away, the ADA protections and things, I could just see all of that funding drying up, and there are so many. I mean, the government doesn't know what to do with the number of, autistic children that we have now coming into adulthood that are not, they're not functional enough to be employable, and there's not enough services for them now. What's going to happen with 2025 if they just, are they going to sweep them into the camps? Is this going to be the big, the big end game? So, but I see it being a huge problem because there's just so much homelessness already in the veteran population, and so many people, even just going across TikTok, the number of creators that I meet that are, they're disabled or disabled veterans, and they're using TikTok as a way to try to supplement their income, and to get by. I mean, it's a pervasive thing. So I really think that, the same people that are out there going, we love our veterans, we love our military, they're going to get behind candidates that are supporting something that is anything but loving the veterans and the military.
Carmen, can I send you back to the chat real quick and bring Maddie up, if that's okay with you? Thank you so much, ma'am. I appreciate that. Let's bring Maddie up. There you are. And there you're not. That was very quick, short-lived. While I'm working on that, oh, there. Hang on a second.
You'll be late, okay, Dad?
Maddie, I did send you an invite. If you would like to accept that, we have about what we got left, 14 minutes to go. Let's slowly bring this towards the exit anyway. Just as far as closing ideas, arguments, statements, visions, hopes, dreams, or nightmares are concerned. How would you, if you were in charge as far as communications are concerned, and you would want to get the biggest bang for your buck to make a difference and invoke change going into 2024 that keeps us with a reasonable semblance of normalcy in this country, how would you go about it? And I know that Gen X usually talks the longest, so I'm just going to start with him.
Go to me last, please. Ladies first.
Oh, sure. Pumped it off. All right. Denise.
Go to me last, please. Ladies first.
Oh, sure. Pumped it off. All right. Denise.
I think that I would.
Go to me last, please. Ladies first.
You guys have a ton of
Okay.
feedback.
Yeah, something is really weird here.
I think that
Denise, can you go on mute for a second, please? Okay, yeah, Denise, you're getting massive echo repetitively. It's almost like we're on loop. Dr. Sandstorm.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so basically, if you were in the driver's seat as far as communications is concerned, and you wanted to get the most bang for your buck to give us a positive future, how would you go about it? Yeah, not easy.
That's a loaded question.
Of course it is.
You
That's
know,
why I started it now.
right, right. The most bang for the buck. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say lead with empathy. When you're approaching people with opposing ideologies, you have to lead with empathy, and you have to find out. I think rather than saying, "Hey, I want to tell you something," ask questions. What are you struggling with? What are you concerned with? What keeps you awake at night? How can you, and then can you help me understand what you think would help you? And do you hear anyone in the political arena who's proposing something that's going to help you? And if they come back with their opposing ideology that's going to help them, start just Socratically asking them, well, that's interesting. Tell me how that particular approach has been helping you, or how do you see it that it's going to help you? And then get them thinking, because you're only going to be able to carry out the conversation by disarming them from their fear. The people on the right are fear-based, and they need to feel safe, they need to feel a part of, they need to feel like they belong. We have to help them understand that we're not so different in the things that we struggle with and what we need. And what about this approach to helping you with what you need? Now, we're going to run into people, though, that, for instance, when I was speaking about the farmers who are being negatively affected by climate change, if they don't even accept that climate change is real, even though they see it destroying their crops, then you don't have a prayer in talking with them about that and helping them understand that. But if they do say, gee, yeah, over the past few years, things have been pretty wild out there, and I can't get my crops in, or I can't get them out of the field, or whatever, then you might have a chance. And you have to know when to walk away and when to stick with the conversation and keep asking questions and keep indicating that you care about being a part of the solution. And that's all I got.
No, that's thank you. Star Child, since Gen X wants to go last, of course he does.
Well, honestly, I saw somebody in the comments say, "Are we at the point that we just need to start buying mass amounts of, hats and shirts and merch and start kind of pushing it the same way that MAGA pushed it?" And I hate that idea, but at the same time, there is something to the grassroots campaign of just getting out to everyday voters and saying, "Are you aware?" I mean, I really think we need to be out there making sure because not everybody's on TikTok, not everybody's on. I took your video the other day and I pushed it out to my Facebook and I literally said to people, if you can watch this and then vote Republican afterwards, you literally do not care about the futures of your children and grandchildren. And, basically like watch it. And it did get quite a few views, but I'm like, we need to be out there grassroots, just making sure the average everyday voter before they go to the polls knows this is at stake because I don't think the average person knows that it's been at stake since 1979. I really don't. So I'm kind of a grassroots get out there, get the word out, and hopefully, I mean, there's nothing we could do with the upcoming election, but hopefully the next time around we have much younger candidates to choose from.
And Tom,
Hello.
how did Tom end up here?
Oh, I don't know. I think it might have been maybe Ginger.
Interesting. Well, Tom, welcome to the panel. Might as well just take a shot since Denise has, I think she's rebooting or something.
Geez,
Any ideas that you,
Oh,
anything you
I don't
want
know.
to share with us?
I kind of just came in. I wanted to go out and come back on my main because I'm on my backup. If that's okay.
Sure.
All right, sounds cool. All right, sorry guys.
We are down to about 7 minutes, so basically we're down to the wire. But
So I guess it's Gen X dance turn, huh?
yeah, Gen X, no
I'm,
escape, buddy, because I'm doing
I'm
that.
going to take the cowardly lion approach to my answer and say that Sandstorm and Starchild gave the perfect responses that would be difficult to elaborate on without, not doing them justice. Um, they were great. I think that if I had a hand in it, I have to choose my words at the very moment very carefully because of what we're talking about behind the scenes and say we need people to put more pressure, um, not just on the candidates, but on the parties. And I'm talking about I love that grassroots term, from the local county levels and up. We have to shift the mindset. We have to get them to understand that not saying the popular thing, but saying the right thing will probably get them a lot further because everybody is so worried about making sure that whatever they say can be used as a soundbite. And we have to shift that mindset and say, screw the sound bites. Say what's real. Because if you produce what you said you would produce, and we made it easier for your candidacy and for you to succeed after you've won by simply having to act on what those promises were, which were focused on your constituents. Wouldn't that be an easier career for you? We need people to change their mindsets from both sides. So I would focus on that other thing. And I know I'm being very ambiguous here. And unfortunately, I apologize to everybody. I'm being ambiguous on purpose for a reason, at least at the moment. But we have to get people to put the pressure onto our elected officials and people running for elected positions to change their messaging to a way that actually speaks to the masses with honesty, integrity, and realism, not on pandering and not on false pretenses and promises. We also have to get the same messages to change amongst all of us so that we are saying, what is going on? So that we are getting our peers, and I'm talking about platforms here on TikTok, to start shifting their messaging so that they're actually educating, not inciting.
Yeah. And I still want to keep it within the time box of about 2 hours. So we're really down to the wire. We might go over a couple of minutes. Justice for Maddie. We finally have you up here. That was a little bit of an ordeal.
Sorry
And
about that.
that's all right. That's all right. You said you had something that connects you to Project 2025. How does that play into it?
Yeah, so I feel I'm a new widow. I'm a single mother, and I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I think that one particular group that as far as education purposes and awareness purposes, you should be focusing on are single mothers across the political spectrum are going to be gutted by Project 2025. And I think even if you shrank down that specific part of it and made some circulars, some pamphlets, some mailers, I mean, let's get propaganda up in here. They're doing it already. Okay. Let's take their propaganda and let's print it out. Let's print it out in big print, in small bits, so that it's easily digestible. We can make it specific to different groups, pull out the parts into a pamphlet that apply to a certain group and say, hey, this is what they want for your group. You don't believe us? Here's our source. Find it on page XYZ, section whatever. This is doable, and you can source it out to many different advocacy groups to focus in on their people. That's what I'm thinking.
I like that idea, and I want to add something to it. I think that, even though we don't have that many actual newspapers anymore, print, but we do have online local news sources, and we can call them, we can message them, email them, and say, listen, you need to run a story on this. You need to get your reporters on this and run stories on it so that it's getting out into local media.
And mommy boards.
Yes, on mommy boards. Yeah.
Tom.
Hey guys, how are you? I think hello everyone. Justice, awesome point, guys. Just fantastic live. I feel like a lot of the focus of the left was so much on Biden in 2020 that we missed a lot of the small things that really matter. And I mean, we can adjust our thinking, of course. And I love that we're talking about small stuff because the small things matter. You know, that we've taken a little bit of a beating on some of the small things, and we focus so much on getting Biden elected that I think we may have dropped the ball on some of those smaller elections in some of these states.
Oh, definitely. I think we are seeing the outcomes right now, and there seems to also be quite a gap in between states that are trending and developing in what I would just call socially responsible. Minnesota being one of them, New Mexico, Washington State, California, Michigan. And then
Professor,
you see, of
can I
course,
add
the
one
stark
thing to what
opposite.
Tom just said?
Go ahead, of course.
I was say, can I add one thing to what Tom just said? I've seen a few creators put out there recently that this is not our election year, but we still need to be focused on it because school boards everywhere will be voting in November. And that's how, like, Moms for Liberty and stuff is, that's how they're getting their way in, is through these school board elections. So don't put your head down just because it's not 2024 yet. Like, be paying
Oh, yeah.
attention to all your local elections coming up in November.
Star Child, that's a great point. Those little bits that I was talking about, find which ones apply to you as a parent in your school
Right.
district. Go read that for your 3-minute bit. Read it right out of there. This is what they want for you. Have everybody nationwide going to school board meetings, reading little chunks of this.
Exactly. So I just wanted,
absolutely.
he just made me think of that. So.
No, thank you.
Tom, do you have anything in regards to communication styles, effectiveness? If you were at the helm of comms, which I think Justice did a phenomenal job in nailing this. But do you want to add anything else before I jump on this and close it out for tonight?
No, that's all right. Please go on, because I came in a bit late and I was interested in hearing what all of you had to say.
Gotcha.
I don't like to necessarily put input unless it's well thought out.
Oh, well, crap, then don't listen to me because all bets are off. So my perspective to this would simply be that there is an escalation as far as communications and effectiveness is concerned. Right now, I think we're still in the perhaps educational phase to say, hey, if 2025 comes to fruition, here are the potential consequences. But there is maybe a time that needs to be determined, whenever that is, probably getting closer to the election, that if you do not vote, here are the consequences. When unfortunately it turns into a similar carbon copy kind of idea as to what the right is doing. Fear mongering and outlining, here's what happens if we don't maintain the master race. In 2045, we're no longer going to be white America. We're going to be diversified America and scare the living fear of Jesus in them. And it's not necessarily a realm that I would want to take, but it is potentially the last approach before we actually fall off the cliff. And as the resident European on this panel here, having been to one concentration camp and then another one, I don't need to see another one in 2023 or 2024 or 5 or whenever. We barely made it out of this. It's been 80 years ago. Let's not do this shit again. So,
Exactly.
my message.
I've actually found out I am automatically eligible for dual citizenship because my dad was a UK citizen when I was born, and I'm planning on going next spring, and I think I'm just going to put everything on paper so that even if it's 10, 20 years down the line, it's like the work is already done if I ever got to make a fast exit. It's like, this is scary.
It is, and
Our
the thing is,
passports are ready.
when you look at some of the underpinnings of the principles of propaganda, how it's been played out, and that's been the basis of my entire account, is that we are playing the propaganda game here, and to some degree, we're finding all kinds of manifestos that are really now combined in Project 2025. And nothing good will come from that, because it's not just the idea as to what they are just overtly stating. It's what's in between the lines that's the danger. So for Trump to say, oh, let's do 100,000 beds, Trump said do beds, and Project 2025 has 100,000 beds on page 143. And when you then look at the stats, the 100,000 beds, that does not meet the 30,000 of detainees. So who's gonna lie in those beds that are now the gap?
Veterans, people like my son.
And therein lies the whole thing. So it's not exactly. So it's not just what's written, it's also what's not written. That's the key ingredient here. Mm-hmm. But 10:03, 2 hours in, which is usually when older people need to hit the head or go to bed. With that being said,
using my Navy terminology and everything, gotta hit the head.
Yeah, Tom, Justice, thank you so much for joining us for last minute.
Thank you so
we'd
much.
love to see you again in the future. Dr. Sandstrom, always a pleasure. Starchild, you are fantastic. Denise, unfortunately, if you're watching this later on YouTube, which is where it's going to be, YouTube, Zeitgeist Pulse, thank you so much for being here. And Gen X Dad, my brother, I appreciate you greatly.
Thank
Everybody
you all.
In the audience.
I followed all of you, by the way. So I just
thank you.
You're all awesome.
I'll get you back.
Also, everybody in the chats on the bottom here, rolling and scrolling and commenting, thank you guys so much for just dedicating your time to our conversation. It's always appreciated. Mods, you guys are phenomenal. You keep us on the air. So with that, next week we'll do something probably of similar value, whatever the hell that may be. And stay tuned. We'll decide, we'll announce, and we'll see you then. Until then, have a good night.
Have a good weekend.
Be well, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.